So I'm pretty sure that most of you have already heard about the twerking incident that happened at a restaurant called True Kitchen and Cocktails in Dallas, Texas. The owner is a black attorney by the name of Kevin Kelly. And apparently, a group of black women were twerking in his restaurant. They were asked to stop 2 or 3 times. They refused to listen. And the owner came out and pretty much snapped on everyone in the restaurant.
I invested a lot of money into buying this building, into developing this concept, so black people can have somewhere nice to go to, okay? Somewhere where we can feel good about ourselves as a... Come on! Stop the music, please! Somewhere where our people can feel good about ourselves as a culture, okay? Yeah. No, real talk. And so all this twerking and shit, take it to Prime, take it to Pink, don't bring it here because we're a restaurant. And so beyond that, 75% of my customers are ladies. And I want men to show respect for themselves for how they carry themselves here. So how can I tell the men to respect themselves and you guys are twerking on glass here? If you want to do it, get the fuck out my restaurant. Because I did it for our people and I did it for our culture. So don't do it now. Don't do it again. I don't want to hear it. If you don't like it, get out because I don't need your money. I need to provide something for my people. And don't do it again. Thank you.
And even though I don't believe that there is anything inherently wrong with twerking, most of you guys already know how I feel about it. I feel that twerking has become excessive and overdone in the media, particularly when promoting black women. And just like in this situation, in my opinion, it's starting to make a lot of black women look very thirsty, look very desperate for attention. And it's just embarrassing to me as a black woman. And like anything else, there's a time and place for everything. And this just was not the time or place to be twerking and dancing on furniture in somebody's restaurant. It's just not appropriate. So what they were doing cannot be defended. And I'll be honest, if it was my restaurant, I would have kicked them out after the first warning. And be clear, I just want to say this. I have seen people of all races behave poorly or inappropriately at restaurants when they may have had a little bit too much to drink. But we also have to acknowledge that a lot of black people really don't have respect for other black people in business. A lot of you really do feel like you don't have to respect black-owned establishments because quiet as it's kept, you look at them just like white people do. You look at them as being inferior. And deep down, you see what black people own as having less value than what non-black people own. So we just have to be honest about that when we have these conversations. And many people were saying that they felt that this man's tone was wrong and he was being unprofessional by cursing at his guests. And I do agree with that. And he knew he was wrong as well for that, which is why he did apologize on Facebook and Instagram. And I just want to remind people that more than one thing can be true at the same time. Both parties here can be wrong because I do know that in most establishments, the proper protocol is usually to escort the party who is behaving inappropriately out of the restaurant, not to lecture the entire restaurant and say, well, if you don't like it, you can get the F out. And look, I'm not saying you got to cancel this man or cancel his restaurant because of what happened. Because if you're not going to cancel these non-black establishments who are very outwardly and openly racist towards black people, then don't cancel his. But what I don't like is how people are saying that because we aren't canceling the Asians or other non-black establishments, that we can't give valid criticism when black businesses do similar disrespectful things to their black consumers. I may not cancel you or your restaurant, but you're not above reproach just because you're a black business. Now, if I were there, I don't think I would be all bent out of shape about what he said because listen, I'm just going to be honest. I hate being around the ratchets too when I'm out to eat or when I'm in a nice place. I'll be honest about that. But wrong is wrong. And we're allowed to say where the owner went wrong as well. He's not above reproach. Most people were not twerking. So why address the entire restaurant and curse them out? They had nothing to do with it. And I feel like had he would have handled it that way, this story probably wouldn't even have gone viral. And again, I want to reiterate that the behavior from the women who were twerking was very inappropriate. But as you saw, most black women in the restaurant were not twerking. So what I'm not going to do is pile onto this narrative that most black women don't know how to act in public and all of us are twerking on furniture in restaurants, because as we can see, most black women were seated and were behaving properly. So we definitely have an issue with black consumers who feel they don't have to respect black business, but we also have an issue with black business owners who kind of start power tripping and thinking they're above reproach or can talk down to everybody just because they have a black business. And I say that as a business owner. And I know, black business owners are not perfect. They have their off days. But, if I have an issue with one or a few customers, I'm not going to blame or fault all of my customers that have nothing to do with it. And another problem we have is black men not knowing how to address black women specifically. They have a real problem with that. Even the so-called good black men, right? Because those of you who have sent me this, one in particular, one person who lives in Dallas, you guys were telling me that this is not Kevin's first time addressing his black female customers in this manner. So if that is true, then that's something that needs to be addressed. You are a grown man. You are a business owner. You need to learn how to hold your composure when addressing your customers. And this is something that black business owners, no matter male or female, this is something that they have a really hard time with. They don't know how to talk to people. And some people are going to say, oh, well, Chrissy, he tried to ask them nicely 2 times and it didn't work. Okay, so if it doesn't work after you ask them nicely twice, then kick them out. You don't turn around and get ghetto and unprofessional and start lecturing the whole restaurant about black business this and black business that. Don't nobody want to hear that while they're eating their food and they don't have nothing to do with what they're doing over there. Another thing that black people need to get better at is creating boundaries. Stop giving black people so many chances. Kick them out like anybody else would do. You don't have to go as far as calling the police unless, they refuse to leave. But kick them out. You're always talking about, oh, well, if you were in a white establishment or an upscale white establishment, you wouldn't act this way. That's true. And an upscale white establishment would have just kicked their behinds out. Because I have never seen the owner of a white-owned establishment come out and lecture the entire restaurant based on what one group in the restaurant is doing. And honestly, I just don't believe that if more men were in the restaurant or if more non-black people were in the restaurant, that he would have lectured the whole restaurant like that. I could be wrong, but I don't think that he would have. I think he had all that smoke because he saw that it was mostly black women sitting in that restaurant. And whether you guys want to admit it or not, this is typical for black men. They address black women in this manner all the time. Even online, they like to make everything personal. They hit below the belt. They become extremely disrespectful and vitriolic towards black women, specifically black women, more than anyone, more than other black men, more than white men. And, even though, again, these women were wrong, I do take issue with black women constantly excusing black men in the way they address black women, especially those who haven't done anything to them. And no, we are not perfect, but you can't go attacking random black women and then claim to be one of the good guys. And you can't only have that energy for black women and nobody else and then expect us not to notice or expect us not to say anything. Because there's another video I saw of black men and the actual owner of the restaurant, to my understanding, dancing on the tables in kitchen and cocktails and also behaving inappropriately. So I do have some questions about this so-called upscale establishment. Now, if this was a private party where the men were dancing on the tables and, they had the entire restaurant to themselves, that is a bit different. But if people are seeing the actual owner act this way, and if black men are allowed to act this way, or if they've seen other people act this way in this establishment, then I do question if he only had that kind of smoke for black women and nobody else. And again, I question how upscale his restaurant is, because I see a lot of people saying, oh, well, if it were an upscale white establishment, y'all would stay in your seats and behave appropriately. That is very true. I agree with that. But if it were an upscale white establishment, they also would have handled it more professionally. So you need to draw it all the way out if you're going to compare it to white establishments, right? And they would also not be playing twerk music at a so-called upscale restaurant. Granted, certain type of music shouldn't have to be played for you to know how to act and for you to know not to twerk and stand on somebody's furniture in a restaurant, okay? But if you're going to compare this restaurant to an upscale white-owned establishment or just an upscale establishment in general, because Black people have those too, and where this stuff doesn't go down, right? But if you're going to do that, then it actually needs to be comparable to an upscale restaurant, because I'm seeing some false comparisons. I've been to places like Capitol Grill and Fogo de Chao and the Ocean Air Seafood Room. Those who follow me on Instagram, you know, because I post pictures. I love fine dining, but I've never gone into any of these places and heard trap music. They're usually playing smooth jazz, and the ambiance is totally different from what I saw in these video clips. So maybe Kelly needs to get some help with branding and marketing so he can attract the right demographic to his restaurant, because there will always be ratchets. There will always be women like that, and men too, male ratchets as well. So you should be trying to repel them from your establishment. Crack down on the rules in your establishments. Get some security so you won't have to be, the owner coming out checking the whole restaurant and the security can just escort the ratchets out, right? Because before this happened, it seemed to be a lot of mixed messages that were being sent out about what this restaurant was even supposed to be. If it's supposed to be like an upscale urban lounge, then they need to market it as such. Get rid of the ratchet music and create a fine dining atmosphere like the restaurants you guys are comparing it to. And yes, it is up to people to act right inside your establishment, no matter what type of music you play. But if you're trying to be upscale, it's still your responsibility to make your restaurant upscale. And don't get me wrong, it looks like a nice restaurant and everything, but it looks nothing like what a lot of you were comparing it to. So my suggestion is, if that's what he's going for, then he's going to have to be more like those restaurants. And, maybe he'll only attract certain type of Black people and maybe even more non-Black people, but that's okay. You'll keep most of the ratchets out, which is what you want to do. And, maybe this wasn't about one single incident and he was just fed up with Black people acting a fool in his restaurant and he just reached his breaking point. I totally get it. But that's still not the way you handle it. Now, I did hear the owner's interview with TMZ, and he said something I agree with about the image of Black women.
One of the most undervalued people in this world, or probably the most undervalued, is Black women. And I'm very mindful of how they look and how they appear. And we have so many classy and nice Black women that come to this restaurant that define what True Kitchen and Cocktails is. And the actions of the women standing on the sofa and pushing on the glass, twerking, is not that. And so when we talk about advancing the culture, I'm mindful of how we all look as people. And that's why I apologize for using the F word, but that's also why I'm very, very steadfast in making sure that our guests carry themselves in the right way at this restaurant.
But it does then sound like your issue is with twerking.
That it's not
that it somehow doesn't paint a proper picture the way you see it. And that doesn't seem to distinguish nightclubs versus your restaurant. It sounds like you don't think twerking is the proper way of presenting the culture. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Kevin, the word you used was classy.
I'm not saying it's not the proper way to present the culture when you're dancing and having a good time at a club, but I am saying it's an improper way to present our culture in my restaurant.
And as you heard, the TMZ guy essentially was making the same argument that some of the feminists make about respectability. And you have to be really, really careful when white people do this. They will condone certain behaviors when Black people do it and co-sign it and act like it's cool, but they would never condone it for themselves or for their daughters or for their children. White women will do the same thing. They'll say, oh, well, we love to twerk. There's nothing wrong with twerking. Meanwhile, they would not allow their daughter to twerk on somebody's furniture at a restaurant, and they wouldn't do it either. So you have to be very careful about listening to white people encouraging Black people to make themselves look bad or behave inappropriately in public. And again, even though I don't like the way he addressed black women in his restaurant, he is absolutely right about what he said here, because black women are already at a deficit when it comes to our image and our representation and our promotion in the media. So we cannot afford to be seen in this manner. And in my opinion, what happened here is a direct result of this rabid twerking culture. And I always talk about this on my channel, and many of y'all don't like me for this, but it's true. And you can scream respectability politics all you want. You can talk about how twerking originated from Africa and how it's not meant to be sexual. But the fact is that this community has sexualized twerking. And like I've stated before, black women twerking, for the most part, is not to get in touch with your African roots. It's to attract the male gaze and get validation and sexual attention, specifically from black men. And we overdo it because we are starved for validation, and we know it's a good way to get attention from black men. And twerking has been so normalized in this community and so protected in the black community that some black women actually think it's cute to now twerk at graduation ceremonies and Black Lives Matter rallies and restaurants. And when I see how embarrassed black women are when these things happen, I can't believe how many of us aren't making the connections and understanding that this kind of stuff keeps happening because too many black women, partially because I can't say it's all our fault, but it keeps happening in part because too many black women keep allowing our over-sexualized image to be one of our most popular types of representation without pushing back against it. Instead, we co-sign it and we defend the right to be the poster child of twerking, and we shut anyone down who says that we want to see something else for a change or we want more balance. This is why when a small group of black women do this in a restaurant and it goes viral, we all get blamed for it. We always go viral for twerking. Have you noticed that? And what happens? A critical mass of black women usually support it or defend it. So, when things like this happen, it's going to be really hard to separate yourself from it, even if you don't necessarily condone it, because you have that many black women saying, oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, it's not that serious. And, oh, we can twerk if we want to. We can do what we want. And I'm not saying that supporting black women twerking in a video or, just having fun with your girls at the club, I'm not saying that's the same thing as supporting black women twerking at a restaurant during happy hour. But I am saying that when you co-sign twerking and being overrepresented in a certain way, you're contributing to those lines being blurred. And maybe you wouldn't dare go to a restaurant and twerk during happy hour on top of some furniture. But if you're constantly yelling about respectability and, how we shouldn't police black women's bodies, you can't really be upset when people lump you in with the ratchets and say, oh, well, that's just what black women do. When you refuse to draw the line to where anything and everything goes and no behavior can be considered bad or inappropriate because of respectability, then it's inevitable that the lines will get blurred. And you guys may not think any of this is related, but it certainly is, whether you want to accept it or not. If you don't want to be lumped in with these kind of women and you don't want to be stereotyped, then you need to support spaces like this who push for corrective promotion or more balanced representation of black women. And by no means am I saying that, if you act perfectly and you never do anything inappropriately, that you'll never be stereotyped. But we're not going to sit here and pretend like playing into those stereotypes doesn't make it worse. We need to stop lying about that. We need to stop acting like respectability never works, because it does. It does. Now, what I did notice is that because of the embarrassment, many black women online are condemning these women for their behavior. They're siding with the owner. So as we can see, black women are holding other black women accountable. And not to mention, the owner said himself that black women make up 75% of his clientele at the restaurant. So it's clear that black women fully support black men who build. So we're also not going to run with this narrative that some black men are trying to push online about black women not supporting black men who build, because we clearly do. And I made this point a long time ago when that black man who opened a hair supply store, I think it was in DC, I believe, And this man made $1 million from black women the first day he opened that hair supply store. He also had mostly black women as employees. So we can stop lying about the collective of black women not supporting black men who build, because there's proof that it's just not true. It's just not true. When black men build something that black women like, or black women can benefit from, or black women enjoy, or something that black women can use, we are all for it. We support it. So we can stop this narrative that, oh, when black men build, they will run. No, we don't. We don't. We pulling money out of our pocketbook and we supporting you Negroes. That's why you need to learn how to talk to black women. But, you know, black women are true kitchen and cocktails bread and butter. They are the primary reason this man is successful. And I really hope that he learned from this situation on just how to handle these kind of situations appropriately going forward. And hopefully he'll clean up his restaurant and get some help with marketing. Other than that, I completely agree with the twerking, and I hope that more black women are starting to see why I've been saying that we should stop defending the right to be the face of twerking and over-sexualization. And I hope we can see that we need to stop co-signing it every time we go viral for shaking our ass as if that is the only thing we're good at. If you're embarrassed by situations like this, then you need to get on code and openly distance yourself from these women every single time it happens. And it's not anti-black. It's not anti-black to not twerk in a restaurant or a nice establishment and act like you got some sense. What's anti-black is saying that standing on furniture in a restaurant twerking or carrying yourself inappropriately in public is blackness or pro-black or a black thing. It's not. And if it is, there's something wrong with that and you should be trying to change it. Knowing how to behave in public is not a white thing or a non-black thing or quote unquote trying to be white. And it's insulting and very anti-black to even suggest that, because all you're doing is belittling and demeaning yourself as a black person. So that's all I have to say about this. I'm done here. Let me know what you think about this down in the comment section, and I'll catch up with you in the next video.